if the critical race theorists are correct, if you're a white person who denies that you're a racist, that just proves that you're a racist. They used a very similar test back in the medieval period to identify witches. For a quick roundup of what the culture warriors have been up to this week, those self-declared champions of social justice who work tirelessly to divide us all up according to race, gender and sexuality. The charity Oxfam has issued a staff survey which emphasises the evil of what they call whiteness. Staff were asked whether they classify themselves as non-racist, anti-racist or neither, leaving many feel as though Oxfam were making needless assumptions of racial bigotry. As one employee said, quote, "I don't want to be subcategorised as either a white supremacist or a full-on racist," which of course is exactly what a racist would say, right? Well, if the critical race theorists are correct, if you're a white person who denies that you're a racist, that just proves that you're a racist. They used a very similar test back in the medieval period to identify witches, and look how well that turned out. And it's not just Oxfam, unfortunately. Shelter, the UK's leading homeless charity, has been training its staff that all white people are complicit in white supremacist systems and that all white people are privileged. Yes, even the homeless, the very people they're meant to be helping. I mean, just look at that. The privilege is staggering. It makes me sick. This, of course, is from a story that was broken this week in The Spectator in Hayden Prowse's WikiLeaks column. You might recall that I interviewed Hayden on the show last week. You can see the full interview online on the GBNews YouTube channel. The revelations about Shelter has come from a whistleblower within the organisation who claims that time and resources are being devoted to this ideological training. According to the Spectator piece, some 708 staff hours were diverted from helping those with no home to theorising about identity politics issues. Moreover, some ethnic minority employees have expressed discomfort at having their white bosses lecture them about racism, but they've been ignored. Because what better way to tackle racism than to disregard the concerns of people of colour? And this is a key point. All of Shelter's executive team are white. Those leading the mandatory courses are white. The CEO is white. It just seems that a lot of the people who are pushing this narrative tend to be white, and that for all their claims that marginalised voices should be amplified, they don't tend to listen when those marginalised voices don't agree with them. I don't like to resort to memes from Game of Thrones, but this image does spring immediately to mind. Besides, I'm not convinced that berating homeless people for their privilege is a particularly helpful strategy. We've seen this before, actually. In an interview with The Guardian, Labour activist Munro Bergdorf said, "You can be homeless and still have white privilege." Even Oprah Winfrey has said that poor white people have white privilege. Her net worth is $2.6 billion, by the way. Like I say, when someone that rich is telling poor people that they're privileged, it's not a good look. I think maybe Oprah's PR person ought to have a word. On a totally different topic, two universities in London, Goldsmiths and SOAS, that's the School of Oriental and African Studies, have informed students that they must obtain explicit verbal consent before any kind of physical contact in the union building. So, if you want to hug someone or pat them on the back, you'd better ask permission first. You don't want to show affection to a friend and inadvertently give the impression that you're attempting a sexual assault. University officials have even said that students should be active bystanders and report any violations. So, if you see a hug that wasn't preceded by some kind of verbal contract, you need to write down those names and pass them to the the university officials. The Canadian government has passed a new online hate speech law which could lead to a fine of $20,000 for a first offence and $50,000 for a second one. Of course, given that the definition of hatred is fairly subjective, is that such a good idea? In the UK, the Tory government is trying to push through the Online Safety Bill, formerly known as the Online Harms Bill, which will usher in some of the most draconian restrictions on online speech we've yet seen in this country. It includes a requirement for social media companies to censor legal but harmful speech. Those who have repeatedly claimed that social media tech giants should be able to censor whoever they like because they're private companies might want to rethink their argument now, given that they will now be acting on behalf of the state. In any case, the whole bill really does need some further discussion. Safety doesn't mean what it used to mean, and neither does hate, for that matter. And as the Online Harms Bill shows, this ideology reaches even to the highest echelons of government, even a Tory government. As I've said before, the culture war isn't about left or right, and it never was. It's a conflict between liberty and authority.